Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Thanks so much. I know everyone who's been following the case already knows about the white Elantra. You may even be sick of hearing about it, but police are still looking for someone driving this white Elantra on the early morning hours of November 13th. It was near the crime scene. So I'm bringing that up again, and the police are adamant that the car is a Hyundai Elantra 2011 through 2013. Now, a lot of people have been sending pictures of Sonatas and cars similar. They only want a Hyundai Elantra. I want to show you the differences between the Sonata and the Elantra. The Sonata tends to use chrome on their trunk over the license plate, and you can see their reverse lights go above the red plastic on the rear lights. On the Elantra, it's the opposite. The reverse lights are on the bottom, and it tends not to use chrome. It also has a much shorter trunk capacity, so it's a shorter vehicle in the back. Also, you can see that on the Elantra, the taillight looks more like an eyebrow or a winged eye, which extends more to that quarter panel. Hopefully, now that we know, we can put this Elantra to bed for now and move on in this case. I want to take a minute to talk about this guy right here.
Buddy, a mini Australian Shepherd, was found skinned and mutilated 3 weeks before the murders. The dog's distraught owners live just 3 miles from the house where the gruesome stabbings took place. I spoke with noted criminal profiler Dr. Casey Jordan. Could there be a connection between this mutilated dog and these murders?
Yes, we do look at that kind of behavior. The torturing of animals, the experimentation of knives on other living creatures often precedes this kind of attack.
This crime happened just 2 weeks before the murders, and the sheriff's department supervisor told the owners that a human did this. This was not done by an animal. However, the sheriff's department does not believe that these crimes are related in any way. I find that a little interesting, and I don't know how they're drawing that conclusion, as they're both done with a knife and they were in close proximity. I don't know what evidence they have on either crime. However, it is very disturbing. The next hot topic of yesterday and today was the scream. So, a neighbor of the victims decided to tell the Idaho statesman that he suddenly remembers hearing a scream somewhere around 4 a.m. He claims he worked in an upscale restaurant and that he's originally from Pullman but has lived next to the students for about 2 years. He also suddenly remembered being at their home during the summer and hanging out with those victims. He's pretty detailed on what he was doing between 1:30 and 4 when he got home, feeding the cat, drinking tea, playing video games, and thought about the scream later. He also states he saw a black luxury SUV at the time of the murders. So I wanted to look into him. The first red flag was apparently his background image is of an X-rated movie, which I don't need to share. He's into batons, so this is some sort of frame-by-frame baton thing. And then I started to scroll down his wall to see what his content was like. He seems to not have lived in his apartment for 2 years because he's been looking for a place to crash. And that was just this past June. In October, he's looking to buy a car that he can sleep in. And he is fighting with an alleged neighbor. He says, "How do you deal with a note on your door from neighbors asking you not to play music during quiet hours? Plot twist, there's no quiet hours in my rental agreement. I live in the middle of 3 frat houses on Greek Row." He said, "That was left on my door during a weekend. I wasn't even home. trying not to judge, but I think it's from the family of 5 who somehow thought it was wise to raise a family in the middle of schoolers on Greek Row while spending their expendable income on a brand new Lexus SUV. So there was some issue with the neighbor. On November 14th, he says, I thought living in Tweakerville was crazy. Now I'm in Greek Road. 4 people found dead in my neighbor's house. November 15th, 4 killed in a stabbing across the street. No screams, no evidence, no trace. So like professional killers? But why? On 3 sorority sisters. Makes no sense. So there you have it. On November 15th, he says there were no screams. Now, he has since edited that. I'll get to that in a minute. He then complains about the FBI spending over $10,000 a day trying to find a killer. I don't know if 50 employees would help that much more than 15 on a case like this. I went looking into his photos, and I do see a large professional knife. It's not the type of knife that they're looking for, but he is a chef, and there is a chef's knife. A few more searches, and it proved that he didn't live at that apartment in 2021 either. He does have a lengthy criminal history. I couldn't see what the charges were, and it's just district court, but his DNA is on file, as you can see here. This is the neighbor looking for fame. I don't know, pretty sketchy. I definitely think police need to check him out. A friend of mine on YouTube, we went back and forth. He uncovered his editing techniques, this Inan. So check his video out at Jonathan Lee Rich's Investigates. I wanted to touch on it only because maybe this guy's just a clown and wanted his 15 minutes of fame. I don't know. Maybe he felt important. Maybe he thought he wanted to help, so he was in his own mind creating a story, thinking he was doing something good. I don't know how, but giving someone the crazy benefit of the doubt. A lot of times people who perpetrate these horrific crimes will try to interject themselves back onto the scene later through interviews, through visiting, through, reminiscing. So I think that at the very least, police really need to check him out. The comments he made are just weird, and he could have worked in a restaurant near the girls, so you just never know. Better to be safe than sorry. Let's look at some other interesting facts. Speaking of JLR, we just got breaking news that he discovered that a registered SO owns a business right behind the Mad Greek. I've been talking a lot about my feelings about the connection of the restaurant, and I've expressed that to JLR as he's a much more experienced YouTuber. We both have the same interest, and we kind of bounce situations off of one another through Messenger. He may have found something very significant.
You shouldn't do that.
I'm not going to take credit away from what he found, so I'm going to put a link to his video in the comment. Please check it out. It's definitely worth watching as it ties into what I've been saying all along. We don't want to bring forth somebody. This is public information, and for all I know, this is all speculation. This man may have changed his life. I have no idea, but this is definitely worth noting.
Allegedly seen following Kaylee Gonsalves at a local business. Police say it does not appear to be connected to the murders. Let's bring in Nancy Gray. So at least that's a little bit of a new nugget, but they apparently say it was an isolated incident. Nancy, what do you think?
Well, this is what we've learned. We believe that local business was a grocery store, and Kaylee Gonsalves went into the grocery store, and then when she left, either 1 or 2 guys followed her out. Apparently, they were trying to meet women, pick up women in the grocery store. Now, is it isolated? I don't know. And according to some of the victims' families, they believe that cops are ruling people out much too quickly. I don't think you can separate a potential stalker who Kaylee told her father about. She told other people about it. She sold that vehicle. She publicized that she was moving across the country. Are they connected? You can't rule it out. I find it very interesting right now that there's a possibility, according to the father, that Kaylee Gonsalves was in fact the target. Why? According to what we know now, the perp came in through the second floor sliding glass door. There he killed Ethan and Xana and then went upstairs. And that's where he killed Maddie and Kelly. If the second floor inhabitants were the victim, he would not have gone upstairs to kill more and left the bottom two unharmed.
Back to the stalker issue. So Kaylee did mention to her family that she felt she was being stalked. I don't think she elaborated on who or what, or the police would have substantiated it and have a record. Unfortunately, she didn't call it into the police, and there are no records, so it can't be corroborated. But could it be true, and could this be stemming from that? It's starting to unravel to look that way, although, again, much of the evidence has not been released. Again, we're using that specific scenario. If in fact that was true, that Kaylee is the targeted victim, which it's starting to look that way, although we have not heard any comparison to what was found with Ethan and Xana. It's more weird because she wasn't supposed to be in Moscow that weekend. So someone knew that she was going to be there. She had a different vehicle. I don't know how announced she was, but someone knew that she was in town.
Also, I think we're going to find blood evidence that would show the second floor victims were first, and there's blood evidence from them on the third floor. If we can isolate who is the victim, who is the target, that will go a long way in helping us find the suspect.
3 weeks in, why is there no suspect?
You know, I've worked many crime scenes where there were multiple crime victims, 3, 4 crime victims. When you have a stabbing of just one victim, that crime scene is covered in blood. Very often with a stabbing, especially with a fixed blade knife, and that's important because with a fixed blade knife, you have a hilt that crosses the knife, and the killer hand will often come down over the hilt and he'll cut himself. I say him because statistically, men commit knifings, not women. Also, statistically, people murder within their own race, which leads me to believe that this killer is a white male. Now, back to the crime scene. Even one knifing is a bloody mess of a crime scene. And you're looking very carefully. I mean, think about it. You see a pool of blood. How do you know the defendant's blood isn't in there? They've got to get the blood out of the crime scene, then to the lab, put it under a microscope, and then look at it to determine and have it tested, is there multiple DNA in that? Now, multiply that times 4. A brutal stabbing where many of the victims were stabbed more than once. Why is it taking so long? This is to be expected. In one crime scene I consulted on, it took 2 weeks, and there were 4 victims, all right? In a case where I had 3 murder victims, it took a week to fully process the scene, and then later we went back and found more evidence. Don't rush it. Yeah. This is not like CSI, where at the end of an hour, you have an answer, and you manage to put in 4 commercial breaks. It's not like that.
So the father of Kaylee Gonsalves, Steve Gonsalves, gave an interview to one of the local affiliates there, saying the police did give him some more information about the murder weapon. He said, quote, "The detective said this weapon is probably something the killer paid money for and something that they are proud of." So it's not like the killer maybe grabbed the knife out of the kitchen drawer. And one of the things that police were said to be looking for soon after the murders occurred was a K-bar knife, which was standard issue for the Marines for decades, which would fit the description that you talked about a long fixed blade with a handle and a hilt.
Another reason I think that there is a hilt is because when a fixed blade knife with a hilt, and it doesn't have to be military for anybody that goes camping or RVing or hunting or anything like that, these are the knives that you always see men going around, no offense, with a sheath on their waist, all right? That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. It can be military, hunting, camping, wildlife. But with that kind of murder, you will see a hilt bruise on the victim's skin where the knife slams in and the hilt leaves a bruise. I think we're going to find that, and he's right. You don't just have that, as you said, in your kitchen drawer. You got to go buy that. And they have been going to knife stores looking for recent purchases.
Unfortunately, these weapons are not hard to come by. You can get one in your local Walmart, pick up the same day. It's not hard. This person came prepared, and this horrific crime was definitely planned.
I mean, when you just think about the absolute horror for these families who still have no answers, Nancy, also to the point of the father saying this about his wife's biggest fear. Part of the reason they didn't have a funeral for their daughter is because she couldn't be guaranteed that that monster was going to not be there. They didn't have a funeral for their daughter because there's no suspect, and the wife feared that that person might actually show up, Nancy.
Absolutely. And she's right, because if police are right on with their determination that this is a targeted killing, that means the killer knew at least one of these victims, and I predict it's one of the female victims, knew them or in their sphere, their orbit. I don't mean boyfriend, husband, ex. I mean, it could be a delivery person. It could be somebody in their classes, which sadly, for the police, everybody's gone home and a lot of people aren't coming back. They're learning on remote. If the killer is one of them, that's a perfect reason not to come back, right? Because he's going remote. Another thing, we know that some cars were just towed, and everybody's screaming, why are the 5 cars just being towed? Who they belong to? Well, it's pretty obvious. The 4 victims and probably the roommate. 5 people live there. So I think those are the 5 residents' cars. They're looking, did the killer touch it? Did he sit in it? Did he urinate on the tire? We don't know. And they're taking those cars to a state facility with Idaho police where they can be very carefully combed over with a fine-tooth comb for any evidence. That's all.
Everyone was told from Moscow PD that these vehicles were going to a secure long-term storage location in the event that they needed to access the vehicles for evidence. Well, here's where they're being stored. Many people are upset at the choice that they made to store the vehicles outdoors. In fact, one of the leading experts, Joseph Scott Morgan, said that trace evidence would now be gone. The exterior of the vehicle has been exposed to the elements, and people are pretty upset about this. Another expert had stated that it should have been stored in a controlled environment in an indoor facility to not compromise the investigation.
Yeah. The father of Kaylee Gonsalves also gave us a little bit of insight into the murders themselves, saying that they were fast, nobody suffered, and nobody felt that kind of pain. You know, I've been wondering what's so puzzling about this is there were 6 people in the house. 4 of them were killed. The other 2, apparently while they slept, the other 2 were never alerted to anything that was amiss in the house. How do you kill 4 people without alerting anybody else in the house?
2 thoughts. Number 1, Ted Bundy. He snuck into the Chi Omega house and bludgeoned people, and a lot of the other girls slept through it. You're dead asleep. The 2 survivors were on the bottom floor, kind of the basement, for lack of a better term. They may not have heard what was going on upstairs. As for what the father said, and I speak from experience after the murder of my fiance, I like to imagine he didn't feel anything, that it was over just like that, and he blacked out. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I like to think. In this case, it may actually be accurate. They were asleep, and the next thing they know, they're being stabbed in the torso, which means the heart and the lung, and you die very quickly. But I hope that he's right. I hope they felt no pain. But if I have to look at it objectively, I think they did feel pain and fear.
Nancy, we'll let you go. You think they're going to find this guy or gal?
H-E-double-L, yes.
All right. Nancy Grace, thank you very much for joining us.
Somehow it always comes back to why did nobody hear anything? I've been thinking a lot about the whole 911 situation and it not being released. The question that I have, if I could ask a question, would be if They were knocking on the door of Xana's room, which was on the second floor, and they thought that she was unconscious and wasn't waking up. So they summoned some friends to come over. The first thought would be, why wouldn't you go upstairs and get the rest of your roommates to come help you? I don't know what happened, but I find that odd that they didn't check on the roommates upstairs or try to get them to come and help, that they called for help from outside. I haven't heard anyone bring that up.
She joins us right now. Nancy, it's frustrating because this is such a horrific crime, and people would like to feel like there's some motion going on. We're getting closer to catching the bad guy or bad guys, but it doesn't seem like they're giving us any information. But, you know, cops don't always reveal their hand because sometimes they keep stuff back to eventually catch the bad guy.
Well, we saw this play out in the Delphi double murders of Abby and Libby. Cops held back and are still holding back a lot of information, but ultimately got the local pharmacy tech. Same thing happening here. There's a lot swirling that the cops didn't know what they were doing. I don't agree with that. And if anybody does think that, let me remind everyone that the Idaho State Police and the FBI are also on the case. There has not been a homicide in this area since 2015. Another thing that has gone largely unmentioned, there was a huge football game that day in the stadium seating 16,000 people. They only live about a mile away, 2 blocks off of campus. Does that have anything to do with it? Probably not, but it's another needle in a haystack for cops to sift through. All the people flooding into that stadium. I believe the killer was within one of the victims' circle. I also believe the killer came in from the second floor. If you come in from one angle, you don't even see the bottom level.
You're right.
Through that sliding glass door.
Now that has been discussed in my part 2 about high ranch houses, and most of those first levels are basements. Nancy's a pretty good expert, and she agrees.
You're absolutely right. And when we look at the exterior, you can see exactly what you're talking about. But Nancy, one of the details they came out with after the first week at a press conference was they said, yes, it was one of the roommates' phones that made the 911 call, but it wasn't the roommate who made the call. Why wouldn't they just reveal who that person is? Because I think that's one of the reasons that people feel like the cops are keeping things from us that would be an easy detail to give us.
The roommates' names have now been revealed. I believe that the roommate freaked out when they realized what had happened, called friends over first, and one of those friends used the phone to call. They've had a lot of access to those roommates. The roommates have been now exonerated. They're out. They're not even suspects at this point. But we do know this. We know that there was one perp, not 2. We know that 3 other stabbings are not connected to this stabbing. We know that random animal skinning, not connected to this. It's somebody within one of these, I think one of the girls' orbit, one of their circle, not necessarily a boyfriend or a stalker. It could be somebody at the grocery store, a pizza delivery guy, somebody in one of their classes, somebody they know, but not necessarily intimately. They were not bound and gagged. We also know that there was no rape and that there was no theft. But I'm telling you right now, and I've worked several multiple victim murder scenes, they've got to go through all that blood, all that hair, all those fingerprints to determine if any of it was left by the killer. And another thing, this perp is most likely not a convicted felon because he's not popping up on APHIS or CODIS. That's telling me a lot about who this is.
And so, Nancy, you say because they would not pop up on those databases, the way to find that particular killer would be with ancestral DNA. What is ancestral DNA?
Absolutely, like in Golden State Killer. When you don't have, like, if I find your fingerprint at a crime scene, but you've never given your fingerprint to the cops, I don't have anything to match it to.
Right.
So with DNA, you have to take that blood and go all the way back, rebuild a family tree like to great-great-great-great-grandparents, and come down to who, with that DNA connection, was in town at that time. That's how you do it, and it takes a lot of time. It takes days to even process a scene like this. cops. I know. And another thing about not getting info from the cops, their duty is not to spoon feed us, the media.
Right.
Forget about it. Their duty is to solve this case, so everybody back off.
There you go. Well said. Nancy, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like Nancy has summed up a lot. The elephant in the room as well is that ladder that we keep seeing. You see it there in the photo behind the police tape? No one has made mention of the ladder. Like, oh, that was the handyman's. It was put there. Oh, we put that there after the fact. They haven't even addressed it, and they left it outside. I find that really weird that they didn't bring that in the house initially and test it. So far, December 10th, 2022, the same clear list is still up as far as suspects go. We have no suspect, and we don't have any idea of a motive. One key thing that I was listening to Kaylee's family talk about is how proud she was of the vehicle and that she liked the finer things in life. Could this have been an act of jealousy because she just got that new car, just got that new internship or job, and was going to graduate? Maybe there was some sort of hatred, some sort of jealousy. Let me know in the comments what you think. Hopefully, I can bring you some better information tomorrow if they release any. In the meanwhile, we hope for justice for Ethan, Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana, and also 12-year-old Buddy. That was just terrible. If anybody has any information, you come across any tips, please contact the Moscow Police at 208-883-7180.